Hi girl! So this week in my biology class we had a very long, broad unit about obesity. So I was going to talk to you today about some of the factors that contribute to obesity. So more generally, obesity refers to having a BMI of over 30. Being overweight is a BMI over 25. And essentially, you probably heard the term BMI used before, maybe at a doctor's visit. But what that does is it takes into consideration your height in comparison to your weight. Because obviously, the weight that's appropriate for somebody that's 6 feet tall is not going to be the same as somebody that's 5 feet tall. So just to kind of put that out there about obesity. And as you've probably seen in the news, obesity has increased pretty dramatically over the past few decades. And that's both obesity in adults and obesity in children, unfortunately. So one of the reasons for the increase in obesity is the food environment. So that kind of refers to our options for where we purchase our food, what kinds of foods are available. And like you've mentioned before, nowadays people eat out at restaurants or eat fast food a lot more times per week or per month than they used to. I know you said that when you were growing up, going out to eat was more of a special treat that you did every once in a while with family, not something that you did every day. So that's one big reason why the amount of obesity has been increasing. And kind of going along with food environment, fruits and vegetables, as you probably noticed in the store, healthy type foods are more expensive in comparison to processed foods like carbohydrates, sugars, and those foods, not only are they cheaper, but they tend to have addictive sort of reinforcing qualities in our brains. So it just leads to a really bad cycle of people only being able to afford or access easily unhealthy foods. And then genes play a little bit of a role in obesity. We definitely don't fully understand the role that they play. One gene, the melanocortin 4 receptor, or MC4R, there's a lot of acronyms in biology gene. So what the MC4R gene, we know that in humans that can be linked with obesity, especially when there's mutations. But due to the dramatic increase in obesity, we know that genetics is not the only thing driving the obesity epidemic. But there is something called epigenetics, which has to do with the interaction between our genes and our environment. So, as I was mentioning with the food environment and our sedentary lifestyles, it is likely that epigenetics, the environment that we're in, which doesn't encourage healthy living, that might interact with genes and then increase the rate of obesity. Also, as you probably know, the buildup of fat has to do with obesity. So this is, let's see if I can get it to focus. This is a white fat cell. It's cholesterol ester here in the middle, and then triacylglycerides around the outside. And a white fat cell, the buildup of fat cells can produce obesity, especially the buildup of visceral fat, which has to do with our peritoneal cavity in our abdomen. The buildup of fat here can lead to central obesity, which is, carrying your weight in your middle, and that is linked to insulin resistance and a lot of negative health outcomes. But not all fat cells are bad. This is what's called a brown fat cell, and what these little brown thingies are is mitochondria. And what mitochondria do is they expend energy, and they can create heat. So brown fat cells can actually warm us up when we're cold, and they play a role in fat regulation. So two different types of fat cells. One, not necessarily bad. The other, buildup of these can cause obesity or lead to obesity. And when we're gaining weight, first the size of our fat cells grows, so they expand, and then the number of fat cells increases. So last I was going to talk about the HPA axis, which stands for hypothalamus and pituitary gland and adrenal cortex. So these are our kidneys, these two are up in our brain. And what happens in the HPA axis is our hypothalamus releases something called corticotropin releasing hormone, CRH, which stimulates this pituitary gland to release ACTH, or adenocorticotropic hormone, and then that travels down to the kidneys and the adrenal cortex and releases cortisol. And you've probably heard cortisol mentioned in different fat loss products, but what cortisol does essentially is it decreases fat burn and increases our fat storage. So when we're stressed, one of the axes that stress can activate is this one. So when you're stressed, that is one mechanism for how we can gain weight. And just kind of as a sidebar, emotional stress can tend to lead to overeating, whereas physical stress, like working out really hard, something like that, that leads to undereating. But obviously, a little bit of stress is good, it motivates us, but a lot of stress over time can lead to negative effects, such as the buildup of cortisol and fat storage. Okay, Grandma, I will talk to you next week. It was good talking to you, and I'll see you later.